and welcome in to another episode of Heat of the Moment. My name is Micah. I am joined, as always, by my fellow host and friend Lino. And Heat fans, we have a big episode today. We'll talk a little bit about how the team has been playing lately, a little bit of the drama surrounding Kel'el Ware and Coach Eric Spoelstra. We'll, of course, cover the Jaw trade rumors, and then we might even make some all-star selections towards the end of the episode if we have time. But Lino, I think news and notes is always the best place to start. And unfortunately, most of the news segment is going to be injury related. First and foremost, fortunately, Tyler Hero has another injury. This time it is to his ribs. It's apparently a really serious type of rib bruise. The in street clothes on Twitter, Jeff Stotts does a good job. He has a database of injuries. He said, I believe it was Kevin Durant last had this injury, and he missed about 2 weeks. Now, the injury we believe actually occurred on or during the January 10th game against the Pacers. So in theory, we're kind of coming up on 2 weeks, but they've actually just started ruling Tyler out for this injury recently. So timeline is unclear. They don't expect him to participate on this 5-game road trip. So he's at least going to be out the rest of this week and potentially into next week. Not a lot of takes here. It seems like the team is unfortunately had to get pretty comfortable playing without Tyler. And it seems like there's just not going to be a long stretch of him being available this season. And you kind of have to just give up on watching him gel with this team and turn more towards just the guys that are available. Do you have any other thoughts on this latest Tyler injury?
I mean, what's the over-under on him playing 25 games this season? Like,
The odds are dwindling.
it's remarkably sad and really unfortunate for this organization, but for a guy who just had such a stellar year last year, that is going to look more and more like an outlier as this season goes on. I think we've both been pretty big proponents of Tyler Hero and really want him to find a lot of success here. And injuries just suck no matter who is involved. But this is going to be really detrimental to contract negotiations for him. It's going to make things really complicated and could bring the vibes down in a real poor way as we go into the next season. But for this season, yeah, it's just kind of a scratch. Like, we're just going to be playing without Tyler Hero. And by the time he gets comfortable, you just don't know what's going to pop up. Like, it's really hard to start your season from scratch over and over and over again. So I feel for him. I feel for the organization. I know it can just be frustrating all over, but even more so for the fan base who've already been tearing each other apart, whether you are
Right.
a fan of Tyler Heroes or not. This definitely is going to add fuel to the flames both ways. So yeah, hoping for a full, healthy, and miraculous recovery for Tyler Hero.
Yeah, definitely. He's right now played 11 out of 45 games, I believe. So he's not on pace to hit 25, but obviously that could change, and we'll just have to see how it progresses. And he's got another year left on his contract. It's not like this, he'll be a free agent this summer, so they have another year to figure out maybe what his next contract with the Heat will look like. But certainly, if you wanted to look at it from the lens of who are the Heat counting on to be their shooting guard of the future, Tyler or Norm? I think going into this season, the answer universally would have been Tyler, and now it feels like it's almost completely flipped because Norm has been so reliable, even though he's so much older. So we'll see how all that plays out. The next bit of news, even more tragic in my opinion, but not technically a current Heat player, but that was Jimmy Butler suffered a torn ACL actually playing against Miami Heat this past week. They were playing against the Golden State Warriors. I think it was around the third quarter. Jimmy went up for one of his kind of signature high point catches, landed with all his weight on his right leg, whereas Heat fans know he's had other injuries with his right knee. Unfortunately, his knee buckled and he tore his ACL. I know some Heat fans, probably a lot of Heat fans, still have ill feelings towards Jimmy. I've pretty much moved past those. Definitely acknowledge the send off did not go well. The divorce was toxic, but at this point, I mostly just remember the fond memories, and it was just heartbreaking to see. I mean, he's 36; he'll be 37 when he comes back from this injury. The Warriors are an aging team. It probably closes any chance they had of some kind of playoff run. But more than anything, it just sucks to see that guy go down like that. The only time I can remember ever him going down and holding his knee like that was the Sixers play-in game where he pretty much tore his MCL right before the playoffs, and it looked just like that. I mean, that he's just a tough dude, and he doesn't scream in pain like that unless it's something really serious. But also, I will say, to watch him walk off the court smiling did kind of epitomize his career to me, because I feel like he smiled in the face of adversity through so much, probably of his life, but definitely his career. Like, I think of the 2020 finals of, being down Bam and Goran, and he's telling LeBron James, like, you're in trouble. Like, that's Jimmy Butler's persona to a T. So I know some Heat fans probably don't love the guy anymore, but it still was heartbreaking to see a Heat legend honestly have to suffer with something like that.
Yeah, like I said earlier, injuries suck, but for a guy like that I think at some point in time, every Heat fan, loved with their entire heart, just to see him go out like this at this stage of his career, one way or another, whichever way, that trade was going to go last year, this is the last thing I would have wanted for him. And yeah, hoping for healing, and I think in Jimmy Butler's mind, he's just going to be right back at it next year, 37, and just, still that same dog. So here's hoping that he keeps his head up. And, man, good luck to the Warriors. They're in a real tough spot right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the final bit of injury news that'll also transition us to our next topic is Kel'el Ware missed the Heat's game against Sacramento with a hamstring strain. That came after the game against the Warriors. I didn't see the play in the Warriors game where he necessarily got injured, so it might have been something where he woke up the next day and it was sore. He's currently listed as questionable as we record right now for Thursday's game against Portland. It's the first game Kel'el has missed this season. I think it was categorized as hamstring tightness. Maybe I said strain, but I think it was tightness. So hopefully it's not something very serious. But what is serious is this, what seems to be a maybe toxic dynamic between the coaching staff and Kel'el Ware. It's difficult to talk about because obviously we're fans. We don't know the ins and outs of these practices as locker room. We have to just pull from what's being said in the media. But what has made this situation odd is how much is being said in the media.
Mm-hmm.
So, Lino, I'll give a quick recap, then I want your thoughts on it. But anybody that's followed the Heat this year, Kel'el's playing time has, kind of waxed and waned. For a while, Spo was starting the double big lineup, so we're getting a lot of Kel'el minutes. They then went away from that recently, so that means they're pretty much fully staggering Bam and Ware. Obviously, Bam's going to get 30 plus minutes every night, so they just only leave so many minutes for Kel'el. And in some games, Kel'el has played very few minutes. When asked about that after the game, Spo acknowledged that it's kind of a lightning rod topic, his dynamic with Kel'el, and then essentially insinuated that sometimes when guys don't get as many minutes, they don't play as hard, as if to communicate, I need more minutes to be better. Of course, I was met with a lot of scrutiny, including by two former Heat players and legends, Dwayne Wade and Udonis Haslem, were both kind of perplexed by those comments. During the next game, Spo came out and said he did not articulate it correctly. It was not fair to Kel'el, and then kind of gave just a generic PR, we're excited for his growth and development. But this is another chapter in a long novel of Spo. And I love Spo. If you listen to this podcast a long time, I don't say negative things about Spo, but it's another chapter of him just seemingly kind of picking on Kel'el publicly in a way he very rarely does players. So that's the recap. Lino, what are your thoughts on this player coach dynamic?
It's troubling because it doesn't even necessarily feel like a player coach dynamic. It feels like Spo is in an argument with himself and with the media and like with the fans about what to do with Kel'el Ware, which, there is a conundrum here. He's a player who is clearly got a lot of potential that is not being maximized for one reason or another. I think the fans assume it's because he doesn't have enough minutes, and I just don't think that's a well-informed assumption, especially with his struggles on defense and with effort in general, which is probably the number one way to get under Eric Spoelstra's skin. It's to not seem like you're giving the effort out there. Now, what I will say is that I think Ware has handled this all very, very well. I don't think he really wants this to be a conversation at all. He went into this season being very comfortable with if the team needed him coming off the bench, then that's what he was going to do, and that's what he was going to be happy with. I think a lot of the fans and the media have been pushing for more, and I think Spo is kind of taking that out on him in a way that I felt was pretty unfair this last go round. Like, I think some of the other commentary is just stuff I'm sure he's already like talking through with Kel'el Ware, and it's just normal coaching things. This last bit, and I'm glad he kind of walked it back, but it did seem uncharacteristic of Spo and pretty unfair given the treatment of much less talented players. As far as potential is concerned. I think Jaime Jaquez Jr. struggled really, really badly last year, and I don't think Spo ever even mentioned it in a post game conference. I think he got benched. We didn't see him for a while, and that was that. Even Jovic, there's been he's been pretty hard on Jovic, which I think is a good balance of like that's an example of another player that has face the wrath of Spo. But it does feel a little bit different in that Jovic, I think, was playing much worse than what Kel'el Ware has done. Like Kel'el Ware, maybe he's not getting back as fast as he needs to get back. Maybe he's not, managing the drop coverage in the way that he's supposed to. But overall, I do think he isn't making nearly as much mistakes as others have in the past to be granted such a short leash. And I think what he does provide is really special and unique and something that this team needs. So I understand the arguments for more minutes. I don't know that they're going to be as impactful on winning as people think they are, but they could be impactful on development for this player who could be something for us. Like there's a path to Kel'el Ware being an all-star. Does that mean we're going to win more games? I think that's where people kind of need to dial it back a little bit. We've seen a lot of centers become all-stars and we still lose the same amount of games because it's really difficult to produce on the offensive side and still have that energy on defense unless you are a top 5 player in the league, which jury's still out on what Kel'el can do there. But overall, I just wish that all of this was much less public. I don't feel good about seeing any of this take place. I don't think Ware's really contributed to that, and for that I'm proud of him. But I do think Spo needs to kind of get a bit of a grip and dial it back a bit. But how have you been feeling about the situation? And who are you siding with in the argument?
Right. Well, I think the final point you made there encapsulates how I feel, which is I wish we knew less about all of this. I wish this
Mm-hmm.
was, just housed in Twitter arguments between fans.
Yeah.
And I think like other players in the past, obviously Whiteside comes to mind, but also Dion Waiters and different guys. Kel'el, the way his deficiencies show up on the court is just the hardest thing for Spo to look past. Spo, he really seems to be a great coach for shooters specifically because he's not worried about missed shots. He was talking about it on the post-game press conference about Fontecchio, that he's not worried about shooting. He wants Fontecchio to find other ways to help. And, the nights he has it going, that's just a bonus. And I think like we're talking about Nico, different guys, the ball going in the basket or not, I don't think Spo stresses over, but not being keyed on any of your assignments, not showing maximum effort, things like that. That's what really is upsetting to him. I will also, just to make excuses for my coach, it was after a very tough loss to Boston, a lost that Spo referenced the following post game and mentioned how difficult and angry the locker room was. Spo also called out the officiating specifically in that game, which is really rare for him to do. So he seems, particularly upset in that post game press conference, but it still stands. This shouldn't be public. Like we shouldn't be hearing all this, in the media. And honestly, to insinuate a player would like not give as much effort because he wasn't getting minutes and almost like saying he's pouting essentially, that's a pretty difficult thing for especially a young player to take. And I think your point about Kel'el is really handled all this stuff very maturely. Obviously we don't know what's
Mm-hmm.
going on behind the scenes, but Whiteside, even Hero, like would make this stuff way more uncomfortable in the media in different points in their career, whether it was, Tyler wanting to start or Whiteside disagreeing with, whatever the different accusations might be. So far, Kel'el's handled it really well. And I kind of want to transition to Kel'el's place with the Heat, I guess. And
Mhm.
A, should he be playing more? I know in a vacuum, yes, definitely, but it would have to be with Bam. Is that worth it to potentially hurt Bam? Like we've at least seen it be the case this year. But so should he be playing more? And then are the Heat emphasizing his deficiencies maybe more than they should be, or are they, trying to make an all-star player out of somebody that might just be an offense first role player that it's just a Miami Heat type player?
Yeah, I think one of the frustrating things about the way the rotation has changed over this season is that it feels like a zero-sum game sometimes, and there's like, do we start Bam and Klo together? Do we not? When you could definitely just do both. Like you can stagger them to share the court for 5 minutes to get Klo on the court a little bit more, get him going, and then take Bam out so he can get to his rest. Like there are ways to get creative with this that I haven't really checked the numbers on how these rotations are working, but I feel like I don't see that. I feel like I see games where they're sharing the court a bunch and then games where they don't share the court at all. And I'm like, well, if it doesn't feel like either of those options are working in this zero sum situation, maybe we need to, mix it up a little bit in the third quarter. Let the fourth quarter be somewhere they share the court more. Like wherever we can find success with that lineup, I do think we should, because I do think it could lead to, because I think the argument is, if Kel'el Ware's at 20 minutes a game right now, is it so bad for him to be at 25? Like, does he need to be at 35 minutes a game? No, I don't think so. But I think we can carve 5 minutes out of a 48-minute game for this guy. And overall, I just feel that he is a guy that this team needs. We need offense in every single spot. Like, especially in our front court, because without him, we really don't have any. Like Bam has his flashes. We'll talk about that later, but generally speaking, is not an offensively minded player. Like that is not his expertise. He's brought a lot to his game there. He's developed a bunch, but he is just not that kind of player. The next guy we have is Jovic, who jury is just still out on if he's going to be a big man that can score for us. He obviously has some really great impact when he's on, but we just have to decide if he's going to be a good player or not. And the jury is just still out. So with that in mind, I think this is a guy that could be good on any team, but especially this team, and especially with our offensive woes. I do agree that we should probably lean into a guy who seems to have some offensive expertise and like a skill set that can be applied, really to any system. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. But what do you think? Do you feel like we should dial it back a little bit? Are you trying to get Kel'el Ware in the trade machine right now?
Yeah, I think it's tough because it honestly bleeds into a lot of other conversations we've had about Bam, about the offense in general, and a lot of it just feels like a poor fit right now. I think
Mhm.
specifically for Kalel, and I don't think that's necessarily like a cardinal sin. You probably shouldn't be catering your entire offense around a second year center that you took outside the lottery. But I do think there would be ways to maybe help him out more. And honestly, Lino, you made this point several episodes ago. Tyler is somebody that I think really helps Kalel. Like they can run traditional pick and rolls. Tyler's obviously our most threatening offensive player when he's going. And that can just open up really easy play finishing opportunities for Kalel. So that's probably an underrated part of his struggles this season is he hasn't been playing with, that kind of all-star playmaker type. Norm is playing at an often like all-star level as a scorer, but he's not the playmaker Tyler is. So that would help Kalel. And then Spo has made references throughout the year to on-off numbers. And obviously the Heat have like very advanced metrics that we don't have access to. But if you do just look at like simple net rating for different lineup combinations, specifically when you're looking at Bam and Kalel, Bam on, Kel'el off is a plus 6.4 net rating, which would be awesome. The team on the year as a whole is plus one, so way better than we are in general. Kel'el with no Bam is a negative 4.4. That would be like, that ranks like 25th in the NBA for a team's net rating. Kel'el and Bam is even worse at a negative 7.4, which again would be like bottom of the league. So I get where Spo's coming from. It's not like they're bleeding points in those minutes, but last season their numbers were okay together. They were slightly positive. This season they're very negative. Kel'el by himself has been negative. So I get why everybody's so enamored with the talent. And then the other part of this that I'll go to is another thing you and I have talked about throughout this year, which is like, okay, with Bam on the court and no Kel'el, they're plus 6.4, which is great. But we also know like Bam can't be out there all the time, and it probably still equates to a 500 team or somewhere thereabouts. So it's like if you're going from 44 wins to 41 wins, but you get to get your second year center a lot more experience, like long term. And again, this is not how the Heat operate. They try and win every game as if it's game seven. But that's another thing where like organizational philosophy seems to clash with where Kel'el is right now, because he probably really does need these reps and to kind of play through mistakes. And they're just not in the place to do that. We've seen Kasparas Yakachonis, the rookie, start to get minutes lately, but that kid, I mean, he plays hard on defense. He makes the right pass. He's tough. He's very Heat culture ish. And you see the Heat, they kind of go back and forth, right? They take Nico, just not really a Heat guy that they want to turn into a Heat guy. Then they take Jaime, that's a Heat guy. Then they
Yeah.
take Kel'el, and it's like, well, we're going to try and turn him into a Heat guy. Then they go back to Kasparas. So it's just interesting to see how they kind of operate. But you can see guys like Pella and Kasparas where Spo is so excited to play them. And then there's someone like Kel'el where it's like, the 7-footer with amazing offensive capabilities. I guess I'll throw him out there.
Yeah, that is just such a strange place to be, because you're right that there's a bit of like, I don't know. I think the Heat really need to reconsider how to apply their philosophies, like how to get the most out of their players and what that is actually worth. Because you go into situations with young players who get given these roles in a season and are allowed to struggle through them, whether it be starting a guy who's really young or putting him in a position where he's probably not going to be great at it his first year. When you think about Scotty Barnes, Jeremy Sohan, some of these other guys who are just given different type of jobs, not even necessarily more of a job, like we would with Kel'el, but just having that space and getting that experience and taking victory in that and understanding, like, we want to win as many games as possible, but we want to win as many games as possible for as long as possible. Like, that's not tanking. Like, that's not, we're trying to lose games. It's like we are trying to win games now and in the future. Like, we need to be a forward thinking organization. And I think right now we're just too much in this game to game situation that we're not really balancing the scales in the right way. I was talking to, this is a bit off schedule, but I was actually watching some playoff football this weekend with Noah, friend of the pod, lifetime Spurs fan. And he was lamenting with me about the Heat season. And he was just talking about how, was the greatest thing ever when the Spurs decided to give up on that LaMarcus Aldridge situation, DeMar DeRozan, and just finally decide to bottom out. Like, it was not a Spurs thing to do. It's an organization that's got a billion championships. They are always in it. They have a history much like the Heat's in regards to success and a desire to win and a desire to never tank. But ultimately, the check came due that team had to bottom out in some way. And now look at them. Like, not to say that every team is just going to win the lottery over and over and over again, but they've been able to bring young talent in and develop a whole new regime and a whole new, roster that has potential and room to grow. And a lot of that comes from a willingness to invest in the youth that I think lacks from where we are. And we don't have to get into should the Miami Heat tank or all these other things, but I think the philosophy of making a decision about young people is going to be really important for this organization, as our only all-star on this team is 33 years old. Our two stars prior to that are either injured or possibly on a decline. I don't think so, but there is a conversation to be had there. Like, guys like Cass obviously need minutes, but guys like Kel'el need just as many minutes to maintain that kind of future progression.
Yeah, I think that's all said and all well said. And yeah, I think philosophically you're exactly right. And this is something we're going to get into later in the show. But San Antonio never really traded for a star player. They never really acquired one in free agency. They drafted them. And it seemed like at a certain point in their organization, they decided we have to do that again. We have to start over. And I think for the Heat, this front office and ownership group potentially maybe falls victim to tricking themselves into thinking the next Jimmy Butler is coming, the next LeBron James is coming, whoever you want to say. So they're kind of like, we'll just play the middle. We'll just look like a good destination. We don't want to look like a tire fire to Giannis. We'll just look competitive. So a star player will think, hey, if I go there, we're off and running. Just like Jimmy, first year finals, another finals a few years after that. So I think that's kind of the middle they're aiming for. But unfortunately, uh, in the aggregate, they're mediocre. So that they're stuck in the middle and they're kind of hoping this savior comes along. And honestly, that's just a tough thing to gamble on, especially with how the CBA is set up now. Guys don't hit free agency. You pretty much have to trade for someone. And if the Heat aren't going to tank, they're not really going to get their like cornerstone piece to trade for these guys. So that's something we'll cover more lately. But I thought all those were good thoughts. So yeah, hope Kel'el can play a little more. I think the other thing I just always like to remind people with the Kel'el thing is if he was a wing, he'd be playing more. This would be a lot easier, but he really is a center. And Bam, while he's versatile and can masquerade as a power forward, really is a center. So, it's just like
Yeah.
these guys, if they could like seamlessly play together, that he'd be out there way more. But so far, the numbers bear it out that they kind of have to be without each other to be successful. And that just limits how much you're going to play. Because in my opinion, Bam's still the Heat's best and most important player. So that is, and he's like Spo's like golden child. So I
Mhm.
mean, we're not just asking Spo play Kel'el more. It seems like we're really saying take minutes from Bam, which is like the last guy Spo would want to take minutes
Yeah.
from. So
And last thing I'll say on this is you brought up another good point. People are going to look at Kalel's numbers on the bench, and some of the arguments are that, like, well, he's also kind of bad by himself too. But we're also playing him in a lineup, and this is a big problem. Big part of the problem is that we're playing him in a lineup with our worst shooters. Like, when he starts, he gets to play with Norm. He gets to play with, the only guy, if Tyler was here, he'd be playing with Norm and Tyler, and those are two shooters. The floor is spread out a little bit. When he's playing with the bench, he's playing with Pella Larson, Jaime Hawkins Jr., not Andrew Wiggins, whoever we end up playing at the wing. Simone Fontecchio has been struggling for shooting for about a month now, and so those minutes get real rough really fast. And if he, oftentimes he's going to be the best shooter in that lineup, it just makes it really difficult for him to find success there. So it's a conundrum where the best scenario he could be in is as a starter, but it doesn't really work out that way. And I think he's kind of left to struggle in those bench minutes.
yeah, that's all well said. And I pulled it up while you were talking because I think that is a really good point. He does play with Norm a good bit, but again, a lot of that probably was from when Bam was out combined with when Club was starting for a while. So if you go past
Mhm.
Norm, the next guys he plays the most with, Davion, not a shooter the defense is going to respect, even though he shoots at a fine volume. Wiggins having a nice season from three, not Klay Thompson, not somebody they're going to fly out to. And then it's Jaime, who gets left completely alone. Pella, who we love, but is not a knockdown shooter. Drew Smith, and then Bam. It's like you go through the guys he's playing the most with. And now part of that's just a roster thing. It's not, I mean, if you
Yeah, we
listed
just
the
don't have a
best
lot of
shooters,
shooting across the roster.
yeah. So it's Nico and Simone are in theory shooters, but even Nico this year isn't shooting well. But those are guys Kel'el's not really playing with. Although more lately, he and Nico have been playing together, which is also I feel like it's
Bad news
Spo.
bears on the damn bench over
Yeah,
here.
I feel like Spo tells him to check in and just closes his eyes. He's like, for the next 10 minutes, this is for Adam Simon, our scout who drafts all these guys. It's like, all right, you get your guys and tell me when Wiggins can check back in. So it's always something in Heatland, but we'll see how this Kel'el thing plays out. Now we'll move on to a little trade deadline talk. We're recording this on the 21st, so tomorrow will be about 2 weeks out from the trade deadline. I believe we haven't really talked about the Ja Morant situation. I think it came out just after our latest show, but if anyone has missed it somehow, Shams Charania reported for the first time Memphis Grizzlies are listening to offers on Ja Morant. Of course, like every star that becomes available, there were suddenly a ton of Heat, Ja rumors. I do think those are substantial in the sense that the Heat are interested in Ja for a certain price and, are always willing to buy low on a, former star or a, descending star, however you want to phrase it. But as with everything, if you're hearing a bunch of rumors and the trade hasn't happened, there's some disconnect or he'd be on the Heat. So then it seems like Miami's essentially just offering expiring money, Terry Rozier and Simone Fontecchio. The Grizzlies don't want that package. And there's reporting that believed by Brian Windhorst that was Miami's not going to give up anything that could potentially impact their pursuit of Giannis Antetokounmpo, whether that's at this trade deadline or in the summer. So, given all that information, let's start with: do you want Ja? And then, how much would you give up? And do you agree with them trying to keep some powder dry for the Giannis transaction?
Yes, and I've gone back and forth with this, but yes, I would want Ja Morant on this team. I'm willing to say that, despite you know the fact that he doesn't like this offense, regardless of the off court situations and how that could be inflamed a bit in Miami, no pun intended. Um, I still think he could be a great player, and it would at least be interesting to follow. Like most of my desire for John Morant is less a need for him to be on this team and more of a need for something different to happen just to see what else could work, because I just don't see this team as it is winning a championship. And I don't see this team as it is building towards a championship either. Like, you don't have to win one every year, but you got to be building towards something, right? And this team feels like it's building towards a future trade in 2028. And by the time we get there, it's a future trade in 2030. So I just want to do something. And John Morant, I think, still has a lot of talent, could really benefit from a change of pace, could benefit from Heat culture. And overall, could work out just fine. And if not, hopefully we at least get some cool dunks out of it. Now, what I'm willing to give up for John Morant is a bit of a different story because it's not much. Now, I would actually trade some players. If they wanted to do John Morant for Tyler Hero straight up, I'd be like, that kind of sucks, but why not? Like, I think everybody in that situation could use a bit of a new scenario, an opportunity to prove themselves, and that would at least be interesting. John Morant for some of our young guys, much less enthused by, and John Morant for a significant amount of draft picks is something I probably want no business in. But I'd be willing up to give a pick if it's one pick that still allows us to trade other picks. Like, that's not terrible. I think wherever we draft, especially in this next draft, like, is John Morant worth the 16th pick in the NBA draft this summer? Probably. I don't know that we're going to bring in somebody that's better than what he can give us for the next 3 to 4 years. Now, beyond that is where I probably draw a line in the sand, but that's just me. What are you willing to give up for John Morant, if anything at all?
Yeah, I definitely would like to trade for Ja a lot for the same reasons you said, which is something different would just be cool. But we also know this team isn't tanking, right? So if we're not tearing it down, then I think betting on a former All NBA player and then hoping you can kind of revitalize his career is a good bet to make. He doesn't have like an insane amount of money left on his deal. It's like 2 years at 40 million each, so less than Bam, just for context. But he's somebody that is a dynamic, first option type initiator on offense, which is something feels like the Heat have lacked forever, really. I mean, since like maybe the big three era. Obviously Jimmy was brilliant in his own way, but a night to night, paint touch kind of facilitator like that would be something the Heat haven't had, especially at the point guard position, in a very long time. So yes, I'm definitely in on the Heat acquiring him to a degree. And of course, that's always going to be the thing, is what would you be willing to give up? Along the lines of what you said, I think the Jimmy Butler Warriors trade package is something to think about. For that, it was Wiggins from the Warriors, at least. It was Wiggins, I think Kyle Anderson and a first, essentially, and then
Mhm.
Davion and other players through other means. But I think something around that would be where I'd feel comfortable. Like you were saying, probably this year's first, which we expect to be, late teens, hopefully. A helpful player. Maybe that's Tyler. Maybe it's Wiggins. Obviously, you get into some fit issues, but maybe it's Davion. Maybe they want somebody like that. But that I feel pretty comfortable with, and I think there's still a real chance it happens. I think it'll just have to be closer to the deadline, and my guess would be the Heat will try and get a pretty good idea about, is Giannis going to be available this deadline or at the draft. Because if you keep your draft pick and then you get to draft night, that allows the Heat to start getting into situations where they could offer like 4 first round picks potentially. Whereas right now, I think the most they can offer is like 2 picks and 4 swaps, something like that.
Mhm.
So if you go into the draft, or sorry, if you go into the deadline and you have a pretty firm idea, the Giannis situation really isn't going to resolve itself until I believe it's October that he's eligible for that extension with Milwaukee. If it doesn't seem like we're gonna know anything until then yeah, I would like the idea of pulling the trigger on Ja then, because again, his value is not going to get a lot lower. You could potentially recoup his value, and then maybe he's the centerpiece for a Giannis trade later, or maybe even more ideally, he and Bam have a lot of success. Giannis thinks, hey, that's not a bad big three, dynamic point guard, versatile defensive center, and then me, the top 5 player. That could be a good sales pitch to Giannis as well. So I say go for it. I wouldn't go anything past this year's first, just because past that
Mhm.
get in such tough situations as far as what you can trade. We're seeing that right now with the Charlotte pick that Miami still owes to the Hornets after the Terry Rozier trade. So I would try and keep it to this year's pick. Young player wise, or just player wise in general, Nico, sure. I think Nico's probably a negative value at this point after that extension. And he's also, I think,
Yeah.
poison filled because of that extension. So that probably wouldn't happen. Cass and Jaime, I know it sounds silly because it's Ja, but I'd really rather not. They just are very interesting to me. Jaime is about to be extension eligible. So, like, if you're not going to pay him,
Jaime's like 31 years old too, by the
he is older. That's fair. Okay, all right. If the deal breaker is Jaime, I guess sure. I know that sounds crazy. This is like I was the guy in 2019 that was like, do we have to give up Josh Richardson for Jimmy Butler? He
way.
just is such a helpful player. And like then a
Yeah.
month later, I was like, who? Josh who? Like,
Yeah.
so I'm sure I would do the same thing here.
I
But
was talking another random tangent, but I was talking to Noah. We were just like talking about old players that we loved and appreciated. And I brought up Josh Richardson. He was like, "Oh man, Josh Richardson, man, that's a deep cut. That's a deep cut. That was one of the most important Miami Heat basketball players of my life for like 4 years.
like our
What do you
leading
mean deep
scorer
cut?
for a season, also played for the Spurs. So I'm sure Noah's very
Yeah,
familiar with his game. But yeah, shout out to Jay Rich. I don't think he's in the
friend of
league
the
right
pod.
now, but also random Heat news we should have included at the top. The Heat are signed or claimed on waivers Dennis Smith Jr. to the Sioux Falls Skyforce, their
Oh
G League
yeah,
team. So,
crazy. What is
he's
he
a
doing down there?
lifelong friend of Bam, former first round pick, very athletic, kind of now a defensive guard, really. So I don't know. The Heat really need another one of those. But if there's a situation where Davion or Drew Smith gets traded, maybe Dennis Smith Jr. could then, be a more viable option for the Heat. So that's something to keep in mind. But uh, I guess, do you have any other trade deadline thoughts, whether it's about Ja, Giannis, or somebody else? Yeah, I
Um,
feel like we're getting close to the territory of the next time we record an actual trade might have happened. Fingers
yeah.
crossed.
That's the thing. I was like, do we want to talk more about just random trade stuff at some point in time? Because I've wanted to circle back to that conversation we had over the summer about trying to find the next SGA out there, as far as like a guy who's like obviously wasn't necessarily drafted to be a top 5 player in the league and MVP, but could have that potential to take that leap and may just not be in the right scenario. And I wanted to throw this out there. I was listening to the Bill Simmons podcast on my run earlier today, and I was informed that Jared McCain is currently playing for Philly's G League team. What is he doing there? Like, that's crazy, and we need to go save him because, I mean, it makes sense. They've got Tyrese, they've got VJ. The only job that's left for him is to be the third best guard on that team. But the G League is crazy. So he's either really bad or the talent is being mismanaged, and we should take him back because we should have drafted him anyways. But
Yeah, I saw he got assigned to the Blue Coats, and I assumed it was one of those things where it's like to get extra practices in for like injury rehab. And then I saw he
mhm.
had like a stat line from a G League game, and I was like, what? So, which, like you said, I mean, they have Maxi, VJ, and then I guess Quentin Grimes. I haven't watched a lot of Sixers, if I'm being honest,
Same,
but
me neither. I don't know what's going on over there, but if he's just out there, they don't really care what's going on. Like, I would trade all kinds of crazy stuff to get Jared McCain on this team.
yeah, yeah, I'd liked him a lot coming out. So, yeah, I mean, shooting is always good to have. So yeah, maybe Jared McCain. There's been some Zion buzz lately, more for Chicago. I haven't seen any Miami Zion
Mhm.
buzz, but similar guy to Ja, where it's like, yeah, he can't stay on the court. You could argue Zion's off court issues are more alarming than Ja's,
He
but
is just a little bit, maybe more weird, but
yeah, there's also been like some accusations and things about
oh,
yeah, some
I didn't know
bad
that.
stuff. So
Well,
anyway,
yeah. Anyways,
obviously would need all that to be disproven. But if it were, and the Miami Heat did their, background checks they do on these kind of guys, that's a similar kind of distressed asset where it's like, well, you take a shot on that kind of guy potentially. Um,
now if they're not going to move him and they're locked in on this Williamson and Queen thing, Derek Queen's amazing. One of my favorite young players these days. We should really pick up the phone and call about Yves Missy or Messi,
yeah,
however you pronounce that. I think he is kind of the odd man hanging in their front court with those two kind of taking a bulk of the minutes. Um, and we
and
could use the depth.
and when he plays over Kel'el, do you want Heat Twitter to just go to your house, or where do you want them to
If he
take
plays
this up
over
to you?
Kel'el, I think, that just is what it is. I think he's just the better player. I think if they saw Yves Messi actually, play well for this team, they'd be pretty excited about it.
Yeah.
But at least we'd have some depth where, like,
Yes.
somebody that Kel'el could play next to you and have some success possibly.
Yes.
It's just like
I going back to the free agency show, and this is like a deep cut, but I still think Gershon Yabusele, who is not playing for the Knicks at all, and the Knicks are shopping, would be a nice depth big for Miami. He shot it well in Philly last year, so he could probably play with Bam or Kel'el, or like we're in the situation right now where Kalel's hurt, we wouldn't have to just play Nico at center. So call me
yeah.
crazy. I still like that one. But yeah, anytime, any kind of like the rumored, upper tier trade guys, I don't think anyone makes a ton of sense. Like I don't think the Heat are going to go all in for Trey Murphy. I don't think they'd give up
Mhm.
first or multiple first for Michael Porter Jr. So and there's always some surprise guy, but of who I've seen rumored, I think really Ja and Giannis obviously
Yeah.
are the two that make sense for the Heat, and that I would obviously welcome if they could make either of those things happen.
Same.
So I think we're getting towards the end of the show. I want to talk a little bit about recent play and maybe specifically about Bam. Uh,
Hmm.
we recorded our last show, I believe, in the midst of Bam's struggles, and he really had an excellent week last week. He actually won Eastern Conference Player of the Week. His shot just started falling. He started playing with a lot of confidence. Had a very rough game against the Warriors after being named Player of the Week, but then again bounced back 25 points against Sacramento. So I wanted your opinion. do you think, I guess, what has changed for Bam, and how do you feel like maybe this could be sustained and to some degree going forward?
Um, you know, I'm happy to see that he was able to, turn things around at least in some brief capacity. Overall, I thought he had a really good week and very effective and efficient from the floor. I don't know what changed. I feel like shots just kind of started going in, and part of it may have been that, the conversation around Bam started to shift, and maybe he started to feel that pressure and really uh, develop that chip on his shoulder. I was like, okay, these guys are really playing with my name now, putting me in these trade conversations, talking about my value as a team, putting me in Keon Coleman edits on TikTok. Like, I can't let this happen to me. Um, but overall, I think Bam's a guy who's really going to stick with it, even when things take a downturn. And he's not going to get discouraged by being in a drought because he can be really confident in what he's doing on the other side of the ball. There's a freedom in that, and there's a way to kind of play through those struggles. And I do think he's reached a bit of a turning point. He's had some incredible games. Sans the Warriors game, I thought that he just did really well overall, and I don't know that much looked different to me. So I was wondering if you saw anything particularly different that allowed him to kind of have some more effective shooting out there.
Yeah, I mean, I think the number one, like, not interesting thing is the jumper has just started to fall. But
Hmm.
I think physically he looks a lot better. Just
Yeah,
that
a
first
little
bounce
more
back
pop.
game, yeah, when he was, I can't remember who it was against now, but when he finally, got over 20 points, he just looks way more explosive, way more sudden. We know Bam plays through stuff, plays through injuries, things like that. It doesn't make sense because if I remember it correctly, we had a few days off, I think because of the Chicago game being postponed. Bam came
Hmm.
out, still didn't look good. And then it was like the next game, he looked really explosive physically. I
Yeah,
don't know why that was necessarily, but it's looked that way to me. He's just looked very sharp. And when you're more comfortable, when you're more confident, I think that helps with the jumper too. Even though a jump shot's always going to have some level of variance, anybody that's ever played basketball at any level knows it's a full body kinetic chain process to shoot a basketball. So if your back's hurt like Bam was, or who knows what else he's going or dealing with, I think just everything feeling more comfortable probably helps his jumper fall. But more than that, I think we're seeing him play center, like we talked about on the last show. I think it's important for him to get matched up against these centers. I mean, you saw in that King game, he had Ragno, the rookie, on him, and Sabonis. And I mean, he was getting to his triple threat. He was blowing by those guys, getting to the free throw line, and just looking quick. And that's how Bam is normally gonna beat his single coverage most of the time. So I just think physically he's looked a lot better.
yeah, I agree. I think those are really good points, and I think the 3-point shot confidence also delves into it. I think statistically speaking, it's just the fact that he's making threes obviously boosts everything about what we do and what his stat lines look like. But even just, I think, what since the Phoenix game, he had 4 threes, 3 threes, 6 threes against OKC in a win that was really awesome. Went 0 for 5 against Golden State, but went 4 for 5 against the Sacramento Kings. And when you can make threes at that rate, it makes everything else on the court way easier. So, not that he needs to be, shooting 10 threes a game all the time, but taking 5 threes, making most of them, I think puts you in a really sweet spot when it comes to getting to the rest of your offensive game.
Yeah, exactly. And the dream has always been for opposing centers to have to close out to Bam at three. And
Hmm.
you saw that a little bit in the Sacramento game and a couple of these others where he started to make them. Then, I mean, if his quickness advantage helps when he's 16 feet away from the basket, if he's 24 feet away from the basket, I mean, he's going to be able to draw a ton of fouls, really compromise the defense, and then make good passes. Also, he's scoring better, so I think it just makes sense. But I feel like his passing has looked sharper. His decision making looks more confident. I don't know if something
Hmm.
clicked, if he just needed to kind of get over a mental hurdle. But yeah, that's a good. He's up to almost 36% from three, which is, and it's not great, but it's really good from where he's been, and the volume's going up. So I think things are looking good for Bam. I'm glad we're not recording this after the Golden State game because I was like, oh no, it was an aberration. He's back to being bad, but he's put up another good game against Sacramento, and I do expect it to continue for the rest of the West Coast road trip. And then finally, All Star reserves will be announced February 1st. So we might or might not record before then. So I just wanted to ask you, Lino, we haven't really talked about this much, but it seems like most analysts I've listened to, whether that's, Nate Duncan or Danny LaRue or all the ringer guys, Zach Lowe, people like that, it seems like if the Heat are getting an All Star nominee, it's going to be Norman Powell, which
Mhm.
definitely is warranted given the season Norm's having. But I wondered if you agreed with that or if you thought Bam or maybe even someone else was more deserving. And then just kind of your thoughts on whoever your nominee season is in general.
No, I absolutely think that Norm Powell should get an all-star nod this year. I think he's worked really hard to really be the only stable thing about the Heat organization right now, is what he's brought to the game, night in and night out. It's been one of those things that is easy to take advantage of and maybe not see the full value in. A guy who's just going to come in and score 25 points a game for you, without question. And he's been snubbed in the past for the Powell or for the All-Star, just from playing behind Hall of Fame talent for most of his career. And so I think this is something he finally deserves. It's his just desserts, and he's really earned it. Is really a big reason why we are at the point where we're a 500 level team. Like, that may not seem super stellar to a lot of people, but I think we're only 3 games behind the 3 teams in front of us. And so we could easily be, a 5th seed, a 4th seed team. We're in the mix still. And we absolutely would not be without Norman Powell on this team, especially given Bam's woes on offense and Tyler's absence with injuries. He's certifiably the most important person on our basketball team, and I think that goes unnoticed for the most part, and I'd love to see him get an all-star nod. It's always good to see our guys get there. Bam, it feels like Bam always deserves it, but for what it's worth, he is having a bit of a down season. And if there's any year he could probably use a health break, it might be this year. So I wouldn't be too torn up. I mean, this guy's, he's been in the finals. He's got an Olympic gold medal. I don't get worked up about Bam accolades anymore. I think he's proven himself to have an exceptional career, whereas Norm, I think, really deserves, a bit of icing on the cake.
Yeah, I tried to make a Bam case just because
Mhm.
I like Bam so much. I am a Bam fan. I concern myself with his Hall of Fame candidacy one day, so I'm like
Yeah.
more All Star nods would be helpful. But I agree with you. I think Bam does so much for the team. We are a defense first team, and our defense is mostly anchored by Bam. But with all that being said, what Norm has done for this team offensively this year, you really can't overstate how important it is. And it's also crazy to think about because the trade was out of nowhere. Like, there were no reports like, oh, Miami's interested in Norman Powell, nothing like that. It was just boom, 3-team deal, Norman Powell to Miami. And we didn't know Tyler wouldn't be available. And
Mhm.
he's just been killing. I mean, just for people that don't know the counting stats, it's like 24 points, 63% true shooting, 41% from three. I mean, he's only at 2.7 assists with 2 turnovers a game. So, I mean, the playmaking isn't like great, but he's a beautiful fit for this offense. And his scoring is just, I mean, it's just about as efficient and effective as just isolation scoring can be. He's just been a flamethrower all year. With Norm on, the Heat have a 1.17 offensive rating. That would rank about 7th in the NBA. With Norm off, it's a 109.7 offensive rating, which would rank 28th. So the difference between almost a top 5 offense to almost a bottom 2 offense, just because of this guy's availability and what he does on the court for this team. So yeah, I like Norm. I think he's deserving. Obviously, it's the East, so Norm wouldn't be a Western Conference All Star. But if you're comparing him to somebody like Michael Porter Jr., even Pascal Siakam, guys like that, who their teams are significantly worse than the Heat, I think it makes sense for Norm to get that nod because the Heat would probably be about as bad as those teams if it weren't for Norman Powell.
Absolutely.
Well, I think that pretty much wraps up today's show. Again, the trade deadline is very near, so we're excited to talk to you guys and hopefully maybe actually get some trades to talk about, which would be very cool. Hopefully, Ja, maybe even Giannis, but we'll see how all that goes. And other than that, we'll keep you guys locked in. We'll keep watching these games. We'll try and take some naps so we can watch these West Coast road trip games. I'm exhausted. But thank you as always for tuning in. Please leave us any comments. We hit on a lot of hot button Heat issues today. So I'm sure if anybody wants to have some opinions about Kel'el Ware in the comments, we'd love to hear them. But as always, for myself, Micah, my good co host and friend Lino, thank you all for tuning in, and we will talk to you next time.